Hello and welcome to this segment of Meet a Columban. In this episode, we're talking with John Din, who is a lay missionary with the Columbans. He comes from the Philippines and he's the second longest standing lay missionary with the Society, joining up in 1992. And from there, he went to work in Brazil for almost 8 years, and then on to Peru for 11 or 12 years. But today he is living back in Manila in the Philippines, and he's been connected mostly with work to protect the environment and also protecting human rights. So welcome to this episode of Meet a Columban, John. It's great to have you here and good to see your smiling face. And could you begin by telling us a little bit about how you came to join the Columbans in the first place? Because at the time you joined, it wasn't a long-standing program. There weren't very many people in the movement, but somewhere or another you put your hand up and you joined.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim, for this invitation. I think my story with the Columban goes further away. Like my parents were all married by Columbans, and I was baptized by the Columbans, and our parish in San Miguel in the Diocese of Pagadian was also created by the Columbans. Suppose if I'm asked, like, how did I come to join the Columban lay mission? It's because of the Columban priests that I met over the years, and there were particularly Columban priests who really attracted me, not because of their role as priests, but because of how they relate with the people in our parish, and particularly the poor, and how they work like in a very difficult times during martial law in the fight for justice and peace. So that's what really attracted me with the Columbans. And again, I was very much involved in the parish too. It was difficult times. It was during the time of martial law, but also the beginning of the movement to care for our common home, for ecology. That I think that's one of the things that I received from the Columbans in Mindanao. I think the Columbans were pioneer in pushing in that. So these are just some things that really attracts me with the Columbans.
But there's something further than that. Something also attracted you to throw your lot in with the Columbans.
Yes.
And you signed up to work full time and
yes.
leave your country and travel across the world to Brazil.
Yeah, there were there were lots of ideals, and it was because of my experience in working with the Columbans. My imagination, maybe if I can do the same things in other countries. So I said, maybe just try 3 years. But then I said another 3 years, and then I end up now, this is my 28 years. And it has been it was not easy, there were difficulties, but really meaningful life. I think that's what everybody of us is looking for, meanings in life. So that's I suppose it started with simple commitment. And it started with an invitation from a Columban priest when I was in high school. The invitation basically was to join the theater group in the parish. That's how, before that, I used to just go to Mass on Sundays. But it was the invitation of particularly Father Neil Collins to join the theater group in the parish. That to me was my own birth into Christianity. That's how I get involved in the parish.
I'm sure you figure these days in some of the writings of Neil Collins, who has really become the society historian.
Yes.
So you'll probably be remembered well in the history of the society one day.
Oh.
When somebody opens up an old tome and looks about these strange people that were walking around Mindanao back in the 1990s. But when you went to Brazil, something got into your blood.
Yes.
Something infected you, which encouraged you to stay.
Yeah.
Well beyond the 3 years that you signed up for.
Yeah. Looking back, like when I had my 25th year celebration, what really Brazil means to me was a baptism of fire, in the sense that it was there that that my image of missionary, what a missionary, was transformed. And I'm very lucky to have met with Columban and worked with Columbans who are really good models for being missionary. I would mention Father Colin McLean, a good friend of mine. He really was a good company in like, you know, in going into mission. But one experience while in Brazil that stays with me now was I used to, like, I worked with Colin with the theater group there, and also with the Black Consciousness group. That was my own interest there, because I was looking for also for issues of ecology, but the Columbans who were working in the northeast of Brazil, most of the issues really there is about the issues of racism against the Afro-Brazilians. So that's where I put my lot. At one point in the series of protests, I was walking and there was an old lady who approached me and she asked me, like, why are you here? This was on my second year. And it was a very difficult question to answer at that point now. If it was the first year, it was easy. But this was on the second year, and things were really challenging me in terms of the history of the church and the history of the church in relation to the whole slavery history in Brazil. So the lady said, if you come here because you want to save us, because we can save ourselves. I thought that was the question that up to now, like, it continues to reverberate. And to me, it was like, you know, something had fallen there and something had opened up, in the sense that I thought when I started mission in Brazil, I thought I was very sure on what I was bringing, on what I had to do. After that questions, I was no longer sure. But again, it opens up a lot of possibilities.
I think you've touched there on quite a widespread misconception that
Yes.
Becoming a missionary is about going somewhere to save somebody,
Yeah,
or to save something, whereas that is not the essence of being a foreign missionary at all.
yeah.
Did you ever come to answer that question satisfactorily for yourself?
Yes.
What on earth are you doing here, John?
No, I think it brings back to me, I think it's a very important questions. And I think answers really depends on how your experience is leading you. Like I was, when I left the Philippines, that was not the mindset I was trying to bring. Like, you know, there was whole training there, like the whole respect for the culture. But it's a baggage that was culturally part of me that I was not aware of. I thought I did not have that. But again, when I arrived in Brazil, you come in there, whether I like it or whether missionaries like it or not, you belong to an institution.
Yes.
The fact that you're a missionary and people sees you with that institutions. And I was like, you know, one of the things that really shocked me was to know the history of Brazil and the role of the church in the slavery. Now, it was a very different church that I had experienced in Mindanao. It was like a total shock of, like, you know, if you look at the role of the church in the whole history of slavery in Brazil. So to me, like, you know, again, there was all like a questioning of my own identity, my own motivation, and also exploring, like, you know, my own faith, and also the church that I, like, you know, I think my knowledge of the church was really very small, in the sense that it was confined to the Philippine experience, and not even the whole Philippines. It was confined to the diocese of Pagadian, confined to a Columban experience. But there is a much bigger reality of the church that I face, that I did not have knowledge to before.
Now, today, you still view yourself as a missionary. You're
Yes.
still a lay missionary. You're still a member of the Columban Society.
Yes, yes.
So how do you image yourself today, or how do you see yourself as a missionary now, not in Brazil or in Peru, in foreign countries, but as a missionary in your own land,
Yeah.
the land that you grew up in.
Yeah. This is, we're living today in a very difficult times, like, of the pandemic, like, of the whole return to an authoritarian rule. And part of me was saying, what's the gift that I bring? One of the things that really keeps coming back is the gift of crossing the borders has brought me an open mind and more critical ways of looking at things, like that there are many ways of doing things. And that I have experienced in other countries like Brazil and Peru. And I think that's what's the gift that I have received from mission. That the God that I used to believe before is bigger, like, and the God that I know now is much bigger than the God I know before. And even in my role in the Philippines, like, I think there's a whole lot of challenge. Like, what's the role of missionaries in the Philippines now? It's the role of missionaries is to show to people that there is a bigger realities that we don't see. And I think that's where the importance of crossing boundaries. And again, it's not just geography, but and just territories. And I think like where Columbans are involved in the Philippines now are we in dialogue with Muslims and the indigenous people and ecology. Now, these are really, I'd say, like, the front line of mission territories now in these difficult times. So to me, that's what's the role. I think we missionaries, like, we're a witness to a much bigger picture that we can bring back, particularly coming back home to the Philippines. And it is difficult, it's not easy. Like, I've been out for 18 years and I have to remake, again, to reconnect with the people here, because it's a very different times when I left the Philippines before.
And it can be very difficult, I think, to try and introduce people to a bigger reality. The area in which you spend a lot of your time today is protection of the environment.
Yeah.
And one of the big problems in the Philippines is logging and the decimation of the hillside and the topsoil running away and silting up rivers. To a person who lives in that area, that can only see their way to earn a living by being involved in that logging industry, even if it's for quite small money.
Yeah.
And they know that if they don't work in that, well, maybe they won't eat tonight.
Mm.
It can be extremely difficult to introduce that person into a wider vision of what's being done to the whole land.
Yeah.
And at the same time, introduce some mechanism or means by which they may be able to make alternative choices in their life.
Yes.
And that is the challenge, I think, that you've taken up in your work with the ecology.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And like in our work, I particularly work with the Global Catholic Climate Movement in Filipinas. It's a network of different church organizations. It's interesting, like that when, like in different meetings, the first questions that people ask is, what are we to do? In this, with our current situations. And it's very difficult to say to people, like, you do this, you do that, knowing that it's their context. But what I really find helpful, and I think this is where, like how important, one point in my experience here, because they knew that I was just coming from mission outside, so they asked me, can you help us try to identify the spirituality of the indigenous people? So I went with them and we went to visit the community, and the dream was, we'll write something of their spirituality, like coming from the idea that maybe you can write their spirituality. But we went there and it was raining the whole day. We could not do anything. But to me, the following day, it was still raining. But what I saw was the indigenous children, they were just playing in the rain. And I thought, what really struck me is it's almost like there was a veil that fall, and you see, how the indigenous people is just very at home with the natural world. I thought that's what we are failing to see, and I think I think that's what we have lost. And I have seen that in Brazil, like the Colombans did not work with the indigenous people in Brazil, but I have been to some of the advocacies there, and it's the vision of the indigenous people here and in other countries. Like there's just a commonality and similarity in relation to the natural world. So it's a model that I think it's one way that's telling us for a way for the future.
So even if you cannot save them, maybe there's a chance they can save you.
I think that has been my experience with in mission in Brazil and in Peru. I'm at the end of the day, I'm very grateful for all the Brazilians who accepted me, who become my friends. And the same in Peru. I can never underestimate what they have done to me more than what I have done to them in that couple of years that I was there. There was a whole lot of learnings there that would not have been possible if not because of them.
And coming near the end, if we finish with one rather difficult question, which I know is quite hard to answer. What is it you think that we need to be saved from?
It is indeed a difficult question, but I think from my own experience in the mission, we need to be saved from the myth that that we're separate, that I can self-sustain my own, that I can manage my life without considering others. I think that's the greatest thing that we have to be saved from. And I think that's the gift of mission, I think crossing boundaries of culture makes us realize that we belong to each other. We're not separate from other people. I think that's the thing that we need to be saved from, that we can thrive on our own. I think, to me, that's what I have experienced too.
I think, John, that's a great wisdom to leave us with. And thank you very much for your time today. And thank you for sharing the wisdom that you've gleaned during your time with the Columbans, your time working in the Philippines, Brazil, and Peru. And thank you very much for being with us.
You're welcome, Jim, and thank you very much for this opportunity too.
We've been talking with John Din, who is a Columban lay missionary in the Philippines, who's been with the Columbans now for some 29 years and is now working in the area of ecology in his homeland.